So we're actually going to show you a little clip by which someone uses this argument to try and poke holes into the idea that the Quran was agreed upon and confirmed by all the companions during the time of Uthman.
And when we go back to Ibn Masood himself, we find that he wasn't treated much better than Ibn Shanabuth. In fact, he was probably treated a bit worse. He got himself in big trouble when he openly rejected the authority of Uthman's text. Further, he publicly scorned Zayd ibn Thabit and told the people of Kufa to reject Uthman's Quran and to conceal the Qurans that they already had so they couldn't be taken.
Your reaction, Shaykh?
Yeah, the Sayyidina Abdullah Ibn Masood radiallahu anhu was one of the foremost scholars of the companions and one of the earliest scribes of the Quran, and a Sahabi who has great weight amongst the scholars of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'een. And Sayyidina Abdullah Ibn Masood radiallahu anhu, he objecting to the appointment of Sayyidina Zayd ibn Thabit is a natural response, I guess, in any scholarly tradition where a scholar disagrees with the appointment of another scholar to a particular role, and that's how it's understood and always has been. So there's no problem in that objection, and he's entitled to his opinion. As for Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood's instructing the people of Kufa to hold on to their private masahif, this is initially he was not convinced of Sayyidina Uthman's reasonings that we mentioned earlier. Of course, Sayyidina Uthman is looking into the future, and this is also natural. And initially, when Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu suggested to Sayyidina Abu Bakr in the first compilation that let us compile the Quran in one place, Sayyidina Abu Bakr wasn't comfortable with the idea. He saw Sayyidina Umar's insights. He was convinced, and they called Zayd ibn Thabit. Again, Zayd ibn Thabit was not convinced of the idea initially. After some convincing, he also came around to their opinion and their position, and the committee was appointed, and he began to compile the Quran. Once again, in the initial, that same objection to Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu's process and procedure initially was recorded of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood radiallahu anhu, and eventually Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood radiallahu anhu came around to agree with Uthman radiallahu anhu and his compilation of the Mushaf. And we know this because all of the chains of transmission of the Quran that we have go through Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood radiallahu anhu. And in addition to that, Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu wa arda informs us some people wanted to speak negatively of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu. They said of him that he burnt the masahif. So he said, do not object to Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu in this way, because he only did that with the agreement of all of the companions, and included in them is Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood. And had this issue continued to be an issue, then we most certainly would have heard of it from the generations of the companions who were known to speak their minds and stand by their positions, as is the case with the tabi'een and tabi'een. This was not a community who shied away from the truth and standing up for what they believed was right. And any study of the early Muslim community, cursory look at the early Muslim community, will see that glaringly obvious.
And this was done publicly, right? So the compilation of the Quran during the time of Uthman, during the time of Abu Bakr, had a committee. It wasn't just Zayd bin Thabit.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it wasn't just Uthman. And there were other Sahabi directly involved. Yeah. And it was known what was happening. It wasn't like this was done behind closed doors and no one had access.
It was a very public process. The announcement was made in the first compilation as well as the second compilation that anyone who has any verses of the Quran that they have written and recorded in the time of the Prophet ﷺ come forward. And then they would, in the masjid of the Medina, they would come forward with their verses, with their evidences, with their witnesses. Absolutely very public affair. And that's why Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood's objection is a public objection. And if anything, that shows us that this was not something done behind closed doors, but rather it was a very open and public matter. Perhaps one of the striking evidences for this is the fact that the claims about Sayyidina Abdullah Ibn Masood having his own Mushaf that was different to the Mushaf Sayyidina Uthman. We don't have any such Mushaf surviving among us. Even those who reported these reports didn't have the Mushaf in front of them, but rather were narrating about the incidents that occurred in the time of Sayyidina Abdullah Ibn Masood. So all evidence points towards the fact that even Sayyidina Abdullah Ibn Masood burnt his own Masahif eventually when he came around to the opinion of Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan.
And as you mentioned, that even Ibn Masood's students are reciting the same Quran that we have today.
Yeah, so all of the students of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood, radiallahu anhu, as I said, the chains of transmission of the Quran that we have with us today all go through Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Masood. So to suggest that that outweighs a report that is explainable undermines thousands of reports that are definitive is an injustice.
If you enjoyed this video along with all the other content that OnePath Network produces, please support us so we can create more beneficial content for the world. Go to onepathnetwork.com and you can support us from as little as $1 a day. Jazakumullah khair for your support.